This is a Smart Crossblade, and it's truly insane. It's just like the smart car that you know, except without a roof, or doors, or a windshield. And this isn't some aftermarket conversion. This was made this way by Smart from the factory. It is truly the weirdest smart car ever. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, big news, this Smart Crossblade is currently for sale, being auctioned live on Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website. It's being offered by the Peterson Museum here in Los Angeles. They've had it in their collection for quite a while, and now they're letting it go, and it can be yours. So, once you finish watching this video, click the link in the description below to head over to Cars and Bids, where you can bid on this Smart Crossblade and buy it only on Cars and Bids. So let's talk Crossblade. This came out in the early 2000s, before the smart car was ever sold here in North America, so this wasn't sold in the United States. Now, apparently Smart made 2,000 of these for the entire world, though I personally can't believe the number was that high because, well, it's not very practical, as you can see. Now, the Crossblade had extra power over the standard smart car, and, of course, it's filled with weird. And today, I'll show you everything. First, I'll take you on a thorough tour of the Smart Crossblade and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a DOUGSCORE. Alright, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Smart Crossblade with getting in, and that is where the weirdness begins. Because as you can see, there are no doors in this vehicle, but there are these large bars going down the entire side of the Crossblade that basically function like doors. To open them and get inside, there's a little latch underneath the bar at the front part near the rear view mirror. You reach under there, you pull it, and then you open the bar upwards, and it moves out of the way, and then you can climb into the car. Then as you can see, the bar stays put because of this hydraulic, which is exposed always when the bar is open or closed. It's always just sitting there, and that keeps it up so you can climb in and out when you have your door bar open in the Crossblade. By the way, when the door bars are open, you can see the door latch underneath, which looks absolutely terrified. Also, one other absolutely bizarre point I want to mention before I climb inside, this vehicle does have a traditional smart key. Flip it over and you can see buttons for central locking, power locks. Even though this has no doors or roof or windshield, it turns out the locks only actually control the trunk, the cargo area, which I will get to in a minute. It's kind of strange to see power locks for just one opening panel, but kind of strange is the theme of the Crossblade. But anyway, next we climb inside the Crossblade, and that's where the quirk madness really starts to intensify in here. Now, first thing to mention is that all of the interior materials are waterproof, which is important because there's no roof. And I don't mean this is a convertible and the roof isn't on or it's difficult to install. I mean there's no roof. It wasn't offered with one, it doesn't come with one, you can't get a roof. It's fully open all the time. So, waterproof materials are nice, and you can see, for instance, the seats. They're not cloth or leather, but instead this hardy vinyl, which will stand up better to water or elements in case you're driving around in your Crossblade and a freak rainstorm shows up. You can see that same vinyl material on the dashboard. That same red vinyl goes over most of the top of the dashboard, again, chosen because it won't be damaged in case water gets on it, which it surely will. And the rest of this interior is pretty much just plastic. There's no like ultra high quality luxury touches in here that would get ruined if they get wet. Instead, it's all just plastic to make sure it doesn't get damaged in the rain. That even includes the footwells. You can see driver and passenger footwell. There's no carpeting in here. There's no floor mats. Instead, it's just simple plastic to avoid typical carpeting getting ruined if you're in a rainstorm in your roofless vehicle. Now, as you might imagine in this rather impractical vehicle, interior storage isn't exactly a strong suit because because you don't have any doors for any door pocket storage areas, and you also don't have a glove box in here. You can see the glove box area is primarily taken up by the airbag over on the passenger side. But there are a couple of interesting storage options, including under the driver's seat. This little fold-out tray pulls out and reveals a fairly decent storage area, I guess, where you can stick like paperwork that you would normally keep in your glove box. Now, another clever storage solution is at the base of the center console, where this little panel hidden pulls out to reveal an ashtray. So you have this little pull-out ashtray that's kind of a quirky thing, and you can stick it back when you're not using it. But that's most of the storage in this interior. There's really not much else, although you do have 3 smart logos vertically positioned below the center console, in case that's any consolation for not having enough storage. It should be noted, however, you do have a little storage behind the seats depending on where they're positioned. If you're a shorter driver and the seat is further up, you could probably stick some stuff behind the seats and get a little extra storage in here. Now, in terms of compromised practicality in this car, another good example of that is in the passenger footwell. You can see it's not very big at all. Most of it is taken up by this angled panel, which really steals a lot of legroom from the passenger. So why is that there? The answer is that's where the battery lives. You pull this panel off and you can see underneath, that's your battery in the Crossblade. Extremely tiny car, packaging and space is at a premium, so that's where they had to stick it. If you're a passenger, that means you're going to be less comfortable. Now, another interesting quirk of the Smart Crossblade, you look around this dashboard, around this interior, and you don't see climate vents. So you're probably thinking that there's no climate control, which would make sense because this vehicle doesn't have a roof. So how effective can climate control really be? Well, you would be wrong with that thought, because there is climate control. The vents are located underneath the dashboard, and when you turn this little dial in the center, it turns up the fan speed, and you can feel air coming out of those climate vents and blowing like on your knees and your shin. And you can control the temperature of the air up here at the top of the center control stack from blue to red, obviously cold to hot, and that's how you adjust the climate control in the Smart Crossblade. Now, other cars have more climate controls than just air temperature and fan speed, but when you really think about it, you don't need those other controls in the Crossblade. For instance, no windshield defogger is needed because this car doesn't have a windshield. No rear window defroster is necessary because this car doesn't have a rear window to defrost. You don't need any of that crap. Instead, all you need is some air that blows on your shins, which this provides. Now, since we're talking about the center control stack in this car, how about the radio, which is mounted here and looks kind of cute, this sort of rounded radio that you can use to play your tunes in the Crossblade. Now, above that in the center control stack, you have this little area which looks like a robot. You can see his 2 eyes and his big mouth, and I'm not exactly sure what any of this is supposed to do. It doesn't look functional at all, including the little storage area here where stuff will surely fall out from, but you do have this little robot-looking panel on the top of your center control stack. But anyway, next up in this interior, also in the center, moving between the seats, you can see the gear selector. Like other smart models, this uses a 6-speed automatic transmission, but it's actually a semi-automatic. It's like a sequential manual, which means there's not a traditional PRND like you would see in most automatics. Instead, you start this car in neutral, and then reverse is down if you want to go into reverse, or if you want to go forward, you move the shift lever over to the left, and then from there you can shift gears. You can see it says plus minus, obviously upshift or downshift, or there's an automatic mode if you would prefer the car do the work itself. Now, when you go to turn off the car, you park it in neutral. There's no park gear because it's a sequential manual instead of a traditional automatic, and that means you have to pull the parking brake in order to make sure it doesn't roll away. But anyway, next interesting quirk in the Crossblade is the gauge cluster, which you can see is just one analog gauge, the speedometer. There's no tachometer in this car. Below that, you have a little screen that shows you a few important items like your fuel level, your temperature, and your odometer. In this case, 25,000 kilometers. I can't believe somebody drove this thing 25,000 kilometers, it seems ridiculous. But anyway, also in this gauge cluster, you have your little warning lights, which are also arranged in this arc pattern, sort of at the base of the arc on either side of the bottom of the speedometer. And then, of course, you have that speedometer itself, which goes up to 140 in this thing. Except that's kilometers per hour, which translates to about 87 miles per hour. Frankly, even 87 feels pretty terrifying. This vehicle, but at least you can't be thinking you're going 140. And next up, another interesting interior quirk in the Crossblade is how you adjust the mirrors. They're not power mirrors, of course, they're manually adjusted, but the control for them is hidden under the door bar. This little switch sticking under the door bar is the mirror control. To adjust the mirror, you just move the switch in whichever direction you want the mirror to move, and it moves correspondingly. And so that's your mirror control. Interestingly, easily accessible from the outside of the Crossblade as well, meaning if you ever see one of these parked on the street, you can just reach under the door bar and move the mirrors. Anyway, next up, still more quirks in this interior. Let's talk cup holders. You have two of them, and they are mounted in a rather odd spot, which is sort of at the top of the dashboard. You can see one over on the driver's side and one over here on the passenger side, and that's where you stick your cups in the Crossblade. And as a result, if you have a tall cup in there, it might actually go above the windshield line, which is unusual for a cup holder. Also in this vicinity, you can see the speakers up here. I believe there are 4 speakers. 2 are mounted sort of facing the interior on this panel that goes across the base of the so-called windshield, and the other 2 are in this dashboard storage tray area. And to me, it looks like those are the only speakers in this car. You can't get any in the door panels because there are no doors, and I looked around everywhere else and didn't find any others. So it looks like 4 speakers all in front of you, between you and the open world. Also up here on the dashboard, you can see a little plaque that says Crossblade with a side profile image of the Crossblade and then a serial number. This is Crossblade number 736. Now, Smart claimed when they came out with this car in about 2002 that they were going to build 2,000 units of the Crossblade, but I personally don't think they made that many for a couple reasons. For one, these things are just not around. They were never sold in the United States, but even in Europe, they're tremendously difficult to find, which to me suggests they didn't quite get to that 2,000 number. I also think 2,000 was optimistic because this car is ridiculous. It has no roof, no windshield, no doors. How could you possibly find 2,000 people interested in buying? So let's discuss that impracticality for a second, and let's talk about exactly what it is that's going on with this car. First off, no windshield. I've said several times in this video this car doesn't have a windshield, but that is actually not fair to the Crossblade. It does have a windshield, and it is precisely 4 inches high, thus providing no actual shielding from the wind, but it's there. No doors, indeed, it just has the bars, no rear window like I showed you before. You can stick your hand right through it, and no roof. Again, not available, not offered, doesn't exist. The car is just completely open, and so you're probably wondering who was supposed to buy this vehicle. It seems odd, although I think the purpose for it was to be in like a beach community for like short drives from your house into town or from your yacht to a restaurant or something like that. Low-speed trips where you want to enjoy the summer weather in Saint-Tropez or Monaco or Greek islands, and that was the purpose of this car, at least as far as I can tell. Now, whether there were 2,000 people who thought the same and actually wanted it, well, I'm not so sure. But anyway, on to the rest of the quirks of this very quirky car, starting with the front panel situation. Now, smart cars are rear engine, and I'll get to all that in a minute, but because it's rear engine, it's no real surprise that this front panel doesn't open. It's fixed in place since it doesn't have to open up to be a hood to reveal the engine. But there is a front panel in this car that does open, and that would be the windshield, the panel that it's on. There are 9 different fasteners around the bottom of the windshield, but only 3 of them are actually functional screws. The other 6, I guess, are there for style or something. But anyway, you loosen the 3 that are actual screws, you unscrew each of them, they come out pretty easily, and then you've unlatched the windshield panel, and from there you can lift it up in order to reveal a few mechanical components underneath, mainly fluids. You can add some fluids under here. This is access to the cooling system, that sort of thing, and that is your front hood in the Smart Crossblade the fact that your windshield lifts up after unscrewing a few screws. But anyway, next up onto the engine and the muscular Smart Crossblade. But first we have to discuss the cargo area, because in order to access the engine, you must first access the cargo area. Now, in order to do that, this rear panel folds down. You just stick your hand in here above the license plate, and then the panel comes down and reveals the cargo area, which is actually reasonably big given the tiny size of this car and its complete lack of practicality. You won't be able to get like a set of golf clubs back here, but you can get some stuff in this cargo area, which makes it a little bit practical. But anyway, in order to access the engine, you lift up this little loop in the cargo area, and you can see this is your engine cover, your actual hood in the smart car. You undo this little fastener, keeping it in place, and then lift it up and reveal the engine. The Smart Crossblade's powertrain, all of 600 cc's from 3 cylinders. This is a 0.6 liter 3-cylinder engine. You can see it says on it, engineered by Mercedes-Benz, in order to give this car a little bit of extra credibility for anybody who thought it wasn't a high quality and powerful engine. But let's talk about that power for the second. The regular smart car from this era, the Smart 4.2 they officially called it, had about 60 horsepower. This, the Crossblade, has been tuned by Brabus, the famous Mercedes-Benz tuner, in order to give it more power. And it ended up with all of 70 horsepower. So the regular Smart had 60, this had 70, which allows Crossblade owners to really take on the drag racers at stoplights. Although actually it is worth pointing out, this car being so small and with so much stuff removed from it, it only weighed about 1,600 pounds. So even then, 70 horsepower is not a lot for like real performance, but it's not like you needed a lot of engine power to get this thing moving. It was really small and really light. By the way, one other interesting item worth noting about this cargo area, on the inside of the tailgate, this plastic panel, you can see 2 like little red buttons on either side. If you push those buttons, this plastic panel actually opens up and reveals an additional storage area, which adds more practicality. Now, there's a diagram in here that shows what this storage area is for, and it looks like it was something for these smart convertible models, like some panel could fit into this spot so you didn't have to stick it in the cargo area. But obviously the Crossblade doesn't have that panel or any convertible roof at all, so in the Crossblade it's just extra storage, which is nice because it's dry storage, won't get rained on, which is nice to have for a vehicle with no roof. But anyway, next we move on to some other upgrades to the Crossblade over the standard smart car, and one related to the wheels and tires. These tires are wider than what you got on the regular smart car, which only makes sense. You needed more rubber in order to put down those extra 10 horsepower that the Brabus tune was giving you. Actually, I'm not really sure how much they helped, but the top speed of this car is said to be 84 miles an hour, so almost matching the top of the speedometer, and pretty crazy to imagine going that fast in this car. Now, also related to the tires and wheels is the wheels themselves, which have a distinctive design compared to the regular Smart. You can see 3-spoke wheels, which were intended to give it sort of a bolder, more exciting appearance to go along with the craziness of this vehicle in general. And if you look closely, you'll see there's only 3 lug nuts, a 3-lug wheel. You don't see that too often, but all smart cars from this era had a 3-lug wheel. It was just a tiny car with a tiny wheel, and I guess they figured it didn't need more than that. But in addition to different wheels and tires and a little extra power compared to the standard smart car, there were other changes made to the Crossblade as well. Of course, no roof and no windshield and no doors. But beyond those, other stylistic changes on the outside. For instance, the front end had a completely different front bumper in the Crossblade and a different front wheel arch that actually leaves the tires a little exposed in the front. There's a little gap between the bumper and the wheel arch, which was totally distinctive from the standard smart car, which didn't have that at the time. Also, another change to the Crossblade on the outside is this bulge coming over the rear wheels. The regular smart car did also have a little panel here, but in the Crossblade it's more bulgy and muscular, I guess, to emphasize sportiness of this vehicle. One interesting thing about this bulge, I like how it comes to a complete abrupt end in the rear of the car in order to make room for the tailgate to lower. It has no like stylistic gradual ending like it probably should in order to really look great, but that's kind of what happens sometimes on low volume, low production cars. You make a little change like this and it's not really worth reworking the whole thing in order to make the design completely make sense. And speaking of not really making sense in this design, how about the fuel door situation? You can see the fuel door is over on the passenger side. You open it up and that's where you put in fuel, pretty standard. But over on the driver's side, there's also a fuel door. It does nothing. It's a complete dummy. You can't open it, you can't get in it, you can't do anything with it. It's just there for symmetry. You have one on one side, so you have one on the other side too. I guess that was their thought. And one other important item worth noting in the Crossblade is the roll hoop around back. This car doesn't have any glass, doesn't really seem to have much protection, but this roll hoop is important for safety. If you roll over your smart car, you gotta have something that can support the weight of the vehicle that's above your heads. And convertibles have to have that. It's mandated by governments in most markets, and so the Crossblade does too. This roll hoop going above the headrest adds a little safety and just a little bit of practicality and rationality to this otherwise absolutely insane vehicle. And so those are the quirks and features of the very quirky Smart Crossblade. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Crossblade. I have to admit, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I already love this thing. This is great. Who wouldn't want to be a part of this experience? It is unbelievably open. I've been in a lot of convertibles and driven a lot of different vehicles, but this is the most exposed I have ever felt. Even more than the Ferrari Monza, which also doesn't have a windshield and is totally open. The world is just around you. And now, I hate to say this, but I kind of start to get it. Yeah, if you lived in a little beach town and the speeds were never more than 30 miles an hour in the south of France or the Italian Riviera, yeah, why not? Sure, this would work. You just drive small distances to local restaurants and shops to do a little grocery shopping, and you get to enjoy the summer day so much more than in any other vehicle. You know, I drive a convertible SUV around beach towns, my Land Rover in Southern California on the East Coast, and it's great, but this is better. It's so open and so airy and so wonderful. I love it. Now, I'm noticing a drawback as I get about 30, 40 miles an hour, which is there becomes some wind. So the issue is you kind of need either a helmet or something to deflect wind. In a lot of cars, that would be referred to as a windshield, of course, but not in this one. And so that makes it a little bit challenging if you plan to go high speeds. You know, the top speed is 80, you'd have to have a helmet. I mean, I can't imagine doing that. It really is a car for like low speed cruising to enjoy the day to its absolute fullest. And I gotta be honest, it's a beautiful day and I'm here for it. I love this thing. But I could see how it would be compromised in pretty much any actual situation. Now, one other compromise that I'm realizing now, but didn't when I was filming, there's no rear view mirror in the center. So you have rear view mirrors on the sides and they're useful, but there's, you have to turn around, which is not ideal. You know, that's not what you're really looking for. This is fun! This is seriously and legitimately fun! I love this thing! What a stupid and ridiculous car! I really can't believe they made it. I think it's absolutely insane that this actually became a production vehicle, but I could totally see the use case for a very, very small sliver of the population. And my guess is it didn't cost Smart that much to make this car. A lot of the panels are the same. Obviously, the basic structure is the same. All they really did was pull off some stuff that cost them money, and they got this. And so I think that, you know, you could see if they sold 2,000 of them, they probably did make money on the project, and some wealthy buyers showed up for the brand. Now, I gotta say, it isn't fast. I'm flooring it right now. Oh my, it is really not fast. And everybody complains about the transmissions in the original Smart cars. Not that they broke, but that they were really slow to shift. It was this early sequential manual transmission. That was what they had to do to get it to fit properly. And it was just not good. And I can see that here. The hesitation is absolutely significant. Now, I can shift gears myself which makes things a little bit better. It actually makes things quite a bit better in terms of off-the-line power, but the gear changes are still like, okay, here, upshift, stay, 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 stay. Okay, now it's got a gear. That's really not an ideal situation. Honestly though, this is gonna sound ridiculous, but I think that's the biggest drawback to this car. Not the fact that it doesn't have a windshield or a roof or doors. Because I think if you used it for its intended purpose, it would be fun, like really fun in a way that other cars will never ever be. And it's not some janky aftermarket kit car stupid thing. Like, this is a real car, that stuff's been tested, that it works well, the door bars are actually, they're always gonna fall into the right place. You know, you drive some of these conversions aftermarket and they're just stupid. This isn't that. This is like, seems to be well put together. Of course I say that, and at the same time I have to put my stuff on the floor on the passenger side, because if I put it in the seat, it might roll off and roll out the car. But I think this thing is cool. And I think if you're in the incredibly tiny sliver of the population who could use this car, not only does it make sense, but it's the coolest damn thing in the world. And I love it. I just really, it's so stupid, but I love weird cars, and this is a weird car. And so that's the Smart Crossblade, an absolutely bizarre footnote in the history of the smart car, and a vehicle where you're unlikely to find another, or frankly anything that's even close. But you can find this one on Cars and Bids. Anyway, now it's time to give the Crossblade a DOUGSCORE. And the DOUGSCORE is here, 39 out of 100, which places the Crossblade here against some other highly weird cars I've reviewed. Ultimately, the Crossblade is incredibly compromised and designed for a very specific person, but I could totally see how it'd be fun, or at least hilarious, to ride around in at low speeds in beautiful weather. It's insane to me this car was ever made, and I got to live out a quirky car life dream by spending the day in it. Frankly, I kind of want it, but only kind of. This is a Smart Crossblade, and it's truly insane. Oh.